So Nicole, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I just want to give everyone a little context. We're in a unique situation here. Nicole just got a really bad ankle injury. So she's coming to us from a hotel bed, but she is a trooper and she decided to still do the recording. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And the fracture did not happen today. I mean, that would be a true
Yeah.
trooper. It's been a few days now, 5 days, but my mobility status still has not changed. I am still sitting in a bed in a hotel room in Bend, Oregon. So
Right. And
yeah.
we'll get to other interesting things about your journey and your travel and all of that. But
Sure.
outside of what just happened, let's start with your yoga journey. So when did you first find yoga in your life and how did it impact you?
Oh, I love this question because it goes back more than 2 decades now. I was in OT school, occupational therapy school, in the late 90s, and had read about yoga as a treatment modality in OT, in rehab. And what attracted me to OT in general was the holistic aspect of it. And then yoga just felt like next level holistic aspects. So that was very intriguing to me. Um, but I did not have a personal practice at the time. So I remember finding a VHS tape of power yoga. So again, late 90s, and started practicing with that VHS tape. It's so hard to even remember how to say that. It was so long ago. My brain wants to say DVD, but we're even like further past DVD.
That too.
And then in the year 2000, I actually took my first actual class. And there's a funny story behind that because so I was in college at the University of Hartford, and they offered, like college credit elective classes. And a friend of mine had signed up for this yoga class. And she asked me if I wanted to sign up too. And I said, I don't want to sign up, but I want to go to the class with you to see if I like it. And I remember her being like, but you can get a college credit. And I was like, but I don't want to have to drop it if I don't like it. Like that was more my concern with having to go to like the registrar's office to drop this yoga class than like whether I was going to like it and get a credit for it. But I went, and it was a Kripalu style of yoga, which is are you familiar with Kripalu?
Yes,
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah. And so it was a teacher that was trained there and just taught this just such a lovely, well-rounded practice. So very different from that power yoga VHS tape. And I loved it. So I continued to go to that class without actually ever signing up for it. I would just show up and never sign in, but just practice. And then in 2002, I moved to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I started working as an occupational therapist. And that's when my personal practice became consistent. Like I really dove deep into my personal practice then. And just became really just hooked on what yoga was doing for me personally.
So before I get into your work specifically with yoga with children, can you tell me a bit about being an occupational therapist? I think a lot of times people get confused between that, physical therapy, and like what exactly you're offering. So can you tell us about that work first?
Yeah, sure. This is another one of my favorite topics to unpack because a lot of people put OTs and PTs into the same category, whereas that makes so much sense because we're both working with the body, and in the rehab world there's a lot of crossover. But one of the differences is that OTs work more with the upper body and upper extremities, and PTs work more with the lower body, lower extremities. And then OT has a more holistic component to it. So instead of just rehabbing a person back to, say, like a certain range of motion, which will be my life with this ankle at some point. So just looking at numbers, which is somewhat of what PTs go on. OTs look more at the person as a whole, and like, why do they need that range of motion in their upper extremity? To like, what are their quote unquote occupations? So like, is it someone that has work? Okay, so that's what we normally think of when we think of occupation. So what's someone's work, their job, but also occupation as a parent, as someone that likes to hike or ski or practice yoga. So looking at how to get a person after an injury or illness back to that point. And then with children, we're looking at children as like their occupation being students and also friends, children of adults. But so student and friend, so it's how to improve skills that are needed in school. So fine motor skills, gross motor skills, executive functioning, sensory processing, but as well as some social skills, like, but not in regard to communication social skills, but more in regard to like playing a game of catch with a friend or playing some sort of recess game with a friend. The latter is what my work in OT has been with children. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and so I've worked in the school setting and primarily with children who have developmental delays and also are on the autism spectrum. And my specialty is around sensory integration and sensory processing.
Wow. So what kind of, so when a child comes to see you, do you see, if you're in a school setting, is it children that are specifically sent to you, or like parents who feel like they need the extra help? So what kind of range of kids do you see like in a week?
That's such a great question. Well, I am not currently practicing occupational therapy in a traditional sense. I still have a license, I'm still registered. I still consider myself an OT. I left the field in terms of working as an OT in a school system in 2014. But I had 12 years under my belt when I did leave. So how it works in public education is that children have to be eligible for services. So they have to demonstrate an educational need to receive services. So it's different than like a therapy clinic where anyone that has the means can bring their child to see an OT. So this is more like, kids who under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that federal law gives them access to these services. Because, I mean, all children would somewhat benefit from OT. And that was such a, I consider it one of the most beautiful things that I got to do as an OT. And that is, I would go into classrooms that had a child that received services on my caseload and teach that whole entire class yoga, and then consider that the OT minutes for that particular child. So that was kind of my way of beating the system of not being able to work with all children.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. So tell me how you started sharing yoga with children, like how you made that transition. I suspect you kind of saw that it just fit in with your OT work and started there.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. So I think like many yoga teachers, when I first discovered yoga, I was just like, ah, this is like the best thing ever. I want to practice yoga every day. I want to talk about yoga to anyone that will listen. Yeah, it was just like, oh, I felt like I had finally found my thing. And it was the same year that I started working full time as an OT. And so I was also super excited about being an occupational therapist. So this was back in 2002, almost 2 decades ago. And I remember being in yoga class in my, like the wheels turning in my mind, being like, kids could do this. Kids could do, like, kids on my caseload could do this. Kids that I see at the preschool could do this. We could do, and then I would just start thinking about all the motor skill and sensory benefits that were happening as kids would be practicing yoga, just thinking about that. And so I started bringing it just in little bits and pieces into the classroom. And maybe about 6 months after that, I learned that kids yoga teacher training was a thing. I mean, this was before social media, right? So I think it, honestly, I can't even remember how I found my first kids yoga teacher training. Maybe in like an OT magazine or something like that. I cannot even remember. So that's when I learned that you could become a kids yoga teacher. And I was like, oh, I should probably do that because I'm been already teaching yoga to children for over 6 months now. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So yeah, so then it's like, so it's just so related and interconnected. So
Yeah.
did you from there, so you're integrating it, and then was there a point when you decided that you wanted to really dive fully into kids yoga and outside of the school system? What made you leave that particular job?
Yeah. Um, so what and I want to say a little bit more before I dive into that,
Yeah.
because there's so many similarities between um, how I and a lot of kids yoga teachers that I know, how they teach yoga and occupational therapy. So OT is very child directed. It's taking kids' interests and then building a therapy session around it. And I mean, doesn't that sound just like
Yeah,
a
that's
kids
exactly
yoga class?
it. Yeah. That's
so
exactly it.
so it was like, I mean, as I got to know more and more about yoga for kids, I was like, oh, this is, you know, just like occupational therapy. So the just the transition and the overlap for me was just seamless. And just OT is also so about the process versus the product or the outcome. And
That's
I
yoga.
mean,
Yeah,
and that's
same.
yoga, that's mindfulness. So yeah, so I just felt like I was just, yeah, so able to do both in such a natural way. And so of course, because I was feeling that both made so much sense, kids were incredibly receptive to that. And then what happened was I started to get burnt out working in public education.
Mm-hmm.
After probably like after year 10, and I stuck it out to year 12, which, not saying that proudly. um, I yeah, just started to get burnt out and started to really feel the strain of working in public education, of the paperwork, of not actually getting to spend as much time with the kids as I wanted to. And then at the same time, my business was expanding to this point where I felt like I had reduced my hours. I was working part-time for Seattle Public Schools at the time, and then I was working part-time in my kids yoga business. But part-time that is more than part-time in both businesses led to me just working a whole lot. However, I loved anytime I got to teach yoga to kids. And at that time, I was teaching in studios. I was organizing summer camps. During my time with Seattle Public Schools, I co-facilitated and organized 2 family yoga retreats. So I was doing, and I was leading teacher trainings too. So there was a lot happening. And I got to the point where, I felt, well, one, confident that I could make it as a business owner, self-employed person. And second, just for my own mental health, needed to make the transition.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And I think a lot of people can relate. I can relate to that, like being burnt out, but then sticking it out for another few years because it's like you just feel connected to the kids and the work is important. And, so it's hard to but yeah, looking back, it's always like, oh yeah, I did that a little longer than maybe my body was telling me.
Yeah, I remember listening to Emily Fleming on this podcast and her talking about just pre-pandemic, that kind of martyr attitude of educators of like showing up early, staying late. And I think that, it's so easy to fall into that way of thinking and doing and being because everyone around you is doing that too. So my hope is that the pandemic has taught educators a lot about taking care of themselves. And then I also think, oh gosh, like since I left public education 7 years ago now, there's been so much more of a push of mindfulness and taking care of, and educators taking care of themselves and supporting each other and taking care of themselves. So that feels really good to me.
Yes, definitely. There is that shift happening for sure. I think it's, it starts slow, but I see it building. So I want to hear about Seattle Kids Yoga. So tell me, so you started it while you were still working in the school. And then, so once you decided then to say, okay, I'm going to go this direction, just tell me about the business and like your mission and how it's changed over the years.
Yeah. So I obtained my first business license in 2007. It was under a different business name then. And for so long, it was just me. So people never really knew me by that business name at all. And then at some point, I switched over to Seattle Kids Yoga. And Seattle Kids Yoga it's such an evolving business, and I love that because it's similar to the work as an OT. It's like seeing the process of versus like, okay, it is complete. Here is this business. Like I'm good. But yeah, it's an evolving entity, and the pandemic really taught me to not be so attached to it and let it sounds sort of woo-woo, but let it tell me like how it can serve me and how it can serve my community. And so with that said, I fought so hard at the beginning to keep it going, to keep online classes. And so I don't have a brick and mortar. I don't have a physical studio space. So at one point I was just like, wait a minute, we can just go on hiatus. We can just take a little break. And I never ended up actually taking a full-on break, but I was able to step back and realize that I still had purpose in life without being running a kids yoga business, without being the owner of Seattle Kids Yoga, even though I still was, and that Seattle Kids Yoga would continue to be what it was. And also it's come out in a way, I'm proud of where it is. I think it's come out in a way a little bit stronger and really much clearer on my mission. And so, the mission in general of Seattle Kids Yoga is to to bring joy, to bring awareness, to bring personal power into children's lives through an inclusive practice, through education, and through fun. I mean, I feel like the first two can kind of maybe be looked at like as a heavier thing, like the inclusivity and the education. They're more of like the heady thing, and then the fun, the joy piece is more of the heart. And they both go hand in hand to create a well-rounded business.
So where is it at now that we're still in the pandemic? It's like we're still here. So are you mostly virtual still? Are you doing online? Are you doing trainings? Like how is it right now?
Yeah, so where it's at right now is in-person classes have come back. Pre-pandemic, we were sharing yoga with over 500 children on a weekly basis in public and private schools in the Seattle area, primarily preschools and early childhood centers. I also have a contract with the Seattle Preschool Program, which is publicly funded preschool within Seattle public schools. So it's funny, I've kind of like woven my way back into the public school system, which just makes a whole lot of sense and is very enjoyable this time around. And so now that contract has come back, and a few others are, and a few schools are like, we're just still waiting, some are like, we're not letting anyone that isn't staff or parent or child into the school until 2022. And like, it's at this time last year, I felt so, well, maybe it wasn't even this time last year. It's probably summer 2020, so much stress and anxiety around getting those emails. And now it's like, okay, yes, that is your process. So glad that you're making those decisions, and we'll be here. So I think I should have figured this out before we were going to chat, but I think out of those, there was about 50 weekly classes, and we probably have about like a quarter of those happening. Yeah. And then, I put our 25-hour certification course online. Myself and another facilitator, we were leading that throughout 2020 into 2021. And now I've just put that on hold. I'm going to wait until we can gather in person to do the certification course, and actually currently exploring putting other courses on, more like specialty courses on a self-paced platform, because I'm feeling a little like zoomed out. I know some people are still really enjoying it and love the community aspect of it, but what I've learned about myself is I really just need to figure out what I want to do first, and then that's going to translate into what is actually best for Seattle Kids Yoga, and I'll attract the people that also feel like that's best for them.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. That's so, I think a lot of business owners are going to relate to this. The fact that, I think everyone's businesses completely took a shift, and there was such a period of time of anxiety and stress and figuring out, oh, what do I do? And other companies are doing this. Do I do this? Do I do the trainings online? And I'm glad you're at a place where it's like, you know what? Okay, I have to be enjoying this. It can't be so depleting, because a lot of these doing trainings online can be real. That takes so much energy, and it's a different kind than when you're getting the feedback in person. And so I'm glad you're kind of like, it sounds like you're navigating, like you said, it's all in line with this theme of the occupational therapy and following the lead, right? And seeing what's in front of you. So I love that that's kind of woven through this whole thing, which kind of leads to the next thing, which is unrelated, but fascinating. The fact that you made a decision to live full-time on the road. Was this, first of all, tell me when you made the decision. Was this early pandemic? I know now you're in a hotel, your injury, but you were living in Is your van called Freebird? You have it.
My van, yeah, my tiny home on wheels her name is Freebird.
Yeah. So tell me about how you guys made that decision, what that's been like.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So yeah, I mean, how things changed in March 2020. So what happened? I mean, I talked a little bit about how Seattle Kids Yoga just kind of went into like this kind of like hiatus hibernation place.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my partner is a designer, and his business was primarily designing these large scale events. And so, you
Mm.
know, those weren't happening. And we were living in Seattle, which just, I mean, so similar to so many cities across the country, but is just become increasingly more expensive. And so we're just paying a whole lot of money to live in the city where we couldn't do anything. And both of us just love the outdoors, love to hike, love to camp, love to explore, love to just like sit out of cell service off grid for days. And so we were doing a little bit of that, just, you know, leaving Seattle, going to the woods, camping, whatnot, coming back. And then Matt had this brilliant idea in August of 2020. He was like, let's just get out of here. Let's pack up the Subaru and just go. And we decided to go to the Southwest and put a rooftop tent on the Subaru, which was really cool. And so the plan was to be out there for about a month, 3 weeks to a month. And we just kept on putting off going back. We were like, let's just keep on going. And so we realized that we finally, like after so many months, felt this sense of calm and felt this sense of peace. And he had been tossing out the idea of getting a van, converting it, living in it, working in it. Even pre-pandemic is kind of like a vision, a dream of his, but I don't think we would have ever done it. So he was still talking about that. It was funny. We were on a hike at Big Bend National Park in West Texas, which is gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous national park. And we're hiking. And I had been thinking about this for days, but I hadn't said anything to him. And finally on this hike, I said, let's do it. Let's get a van. Let's buy a van. Let's convert it. Let's like ride out the rest of 2020 in it into 2021. And now it looks like into 2022. But and so his reaction was hilarious because he was like, whoa, I don't know. And after like months of trying to convince me that this was a good idea. So then once he like got over the shock that I was on board for this too, like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And so we got back from that trip in September 2020, moved out of our house, bought a van, a 2020 4x4 Sprinter van, which is, Freebird is just as badass as she is beautiful. She has like these huge tires and solar panels, and I mean, she's decked out to go like off-roading wherever and off-grid for a very long time. And we spent about 6 months turning her into a home with a bed and a kitchen and a composting toilet and an office and an induction cooktop and plumbing and electrical and like an outdoor shower. Yeah, it's and we also were, you know, very aware that we're not millennials. We're in our 40s. And we're like, if we're going to live in a tiny home on wheels, we're going to have everything we want in it.
Yeah, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. And we do. And she's awesome. And the name Freebird comes from Matt's last name is Bird and BIRD. So we were like, well, obviously we need to, you know, name our offspring after you. And so she became Freebird. And I thought that we might call her Birdie or Bird, but we call her Free. That's her nickname. And I haven't seen her since Wednesday when I fractured my ankle. So I'm missing her madly. Sometimes sometimes I can see her from the window, but
You just
yeah.
wave. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so I mean, so yeah, that's our current living situation. And I'll tell you, it's like we find these incredibly beautiful out of civilization in the middle of nowhere places to park for the night, where like my kitchen view as I'm cooking or doing the dishes is like the $1 million view, and
Hmm.
we just roll up right to it.
That's so amazing. That's so inspiring that you had the vision and that you guys actually did it, that you went for it and were like, we're doing. It's funny that he was really gung-ho, and then once you agreed, he was probably surprised, like, wait, I I didn't think you'd really
Like,
agree.
wait a
So,
minute.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's so
we
wonderful.
Yeah, we also jumped into the project of doing this very naive. There's definitely like a lot of blood, sweat, and tears
Yeah, I can
converting this,
imagine. Oh
because
my
we were like,
God.
I again, Matt's a designer and really, super skilled at things like this. And at the same time, back to the pandemic, it's like doing anything, at least for me, for us, doing anything during those months that was even the least bit challenging became like 100 times more
Oh
challenging.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
like just level of frustration and
Yeah.
whatnot. But yeah, so we've just been really taking just since we've been on the road full time, it's been about 6 months. So we left Seattle in November 2020, beginning in November.
Mm.
So we're like 11 months since we became these nomads. And it it's funny, as we were on that hike with my ankle, we were just talking about how like we feel like we can finally like exhale, like, okay, like my Seattle Kids Yoga has picked back up, my business has picked back
Mm.
up. Matt's working as a freelance designer right now, like his work has been inspiring, and there's been a good amount of it. So, and
And
then
then you
the universe
fracture
was
your
like,
ankle.
hey, yeah, hey, let's see
I know you think you have
what you
control
do with
again.
this test. Yeah.
Yeah. Just reminding you, no
Yeah.
control. Oh my God. Well, thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that story. I think it's just so
Yeah.
fascinating. I think people are gonna just be very inspired to hear it.
Yeah.
Well, I want to circle back to
Mm.
all of your kids' yoga work and just teaching so many children in Seattle area and in schools, and how it's coming back. So I'd love to hear your kids yoga gem, which is how I always end the
Mm.
episode. So what would be your one big piece of advice to anyone that's sharing yoga with children?
Yes, thank you for asking that. And I was thinking about this one because as a Libra, I'm a Libra, choosing just one thing is not my strong suit. But I did. And that is to always be that student as well. So to be that student of yoga as well, and also to be still learning about kids yoga and how we can always do better. Okay, and I use we in like that this general sense, or just how you can always do better. So the pandemic also provided me with space to re-examine a lot of what I was offering through an anti-racism lens, through a cultural appropriation lens, and also through that inclusivity lens. Like we were doing a really good job including children of all abilities, but what about children of all genders? And so there's always more to be bringing in, and the work there never ends. I do want to give a little shout out to Susanna Barkataki if people want to learn more about that cultural appropriation and how to turn it into cultural appreciation. I'm sure you've heard of her, Jessica. She's just such a godsend to this yoga world. And then also Nicole Cardoza and her team at Anti-Racism Daily to learn more about just all the anti-racism practices that we can, as white kids yoga teachers, be bringing into classes for all children, for children of all races. So that's my gem, and just go about it with curiosity, go about it with an open heart, and go about it with excitement that you get to learn more and that you get to do better.
That's so well put. Always learning, always evolving, always doing better, because when we know better, we do better, and just keeping that open mind. And that's what I love about this work, is that it's always expanding and changing and growing. And there's such a community out there. Like you mentioned, there's so many people, that you can follow and learn from, and buy their work.
Yes, for sure. Did you say buy their work?
Yeah, get the book, get Susanna's book, and
buy their work.
Yes,
pay them for their time.
Exactly.
I thought that's what you wanted to say.
Yes.
I thought that's what you said, but I actually wanted to then emphasize that. Yeah, the importance of paying for those resources, paying people for their time and their efforts and what they have to share with us.
Right.
So important. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'd love for people to be able to find you too, and the work you're doing, and if they want to get in touch. So can you point us to your website, social media?
Yeah, so it's all under Seattle Kids Yoga. So seattlekidsyoga.com, and then just the handle Seattle Kids Yoga. And then I also have a book coming out, Yoga for Little Kids. And so that is available wherever you get your books. And that's specifically for those 1 to 3-year-olds. And it's called Yoga for Little Kids, Simple Poses with a Purpose. So each pose is attached to a developmental benefit or just some sort of skill that those little ones are working on.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story. I really, really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking to you too, Jessica. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and have a wonderful evening, and good luck with your upcoming surgery on that ankle. I wish you luck and good healing and good therapy to get your ankle going again.
It's gonna be a process for sure.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. Well, do you know when this will be up?
Yeah. Well, let's sign off now, and we'll chat about that.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I wasn't sure if we were signed off or not. Or okay.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah. You too.